Victor Cupid, private detective here. The case, if you can call it that I'm going to relate to you today is a very strange one because I dreamed it. Or at least I think I did. It started with my client, presidential candidate Rhea Saganson. Her rival, Governor Fred, furious that we had gotten the better of him by exposing the phoniness of his word salad speeches, was now exacting his revenge by attacking Rhea as a vile degenerate because she's a lesbian. Now, I will have lots more to say about Rhea and her girlfriend, the beautiful Leda, on future occasions, but right now I want to take advantage of the current Ozmania, thanks to the Wicked movie, and relate to you my very bizarre dream that I'm pretty sure was precipitated by the smear campaign against Rhea and Leda by small-minded gatekeepers still stuck in the Victorian era. Knock, 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 knock. I sat up in my chair with a start. I must have dozed off while thinking about Rhea, Leda, and lesbian heads of state in general. Knock, 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 knock. Come in. Into the office came an odd pixie of a young woman. She was dressed like a French maid, albeit one of the more modest ones, but with a very energetic and sprightly manner. "Are you Victor Cupid?" "That's the name on the door, so I assume so." "My name is Jellia Jam. I am the royal maid in the Emerald City of the marvelous land of Oz." "I see," I said with a smile, "but I thought Comic-Con was last month." "I'm not cosplaying," she said indignantly. "I really am from Oz." "But my dear young woman," I said, "Oz is a fantasy land, a work of fiction." "Maybe in your universe it is," the girl said, "but I'm from a different universe." "Oh, a parallel universe," I mused. I have, of course, heard of such things. "But Oz has magic, and magic defies the laws of physics. So how can Oz be real in any universe?" "I don't know how, but it is," the girl insisted. "Here, I'll prove it to you." The strange maid then produced her feather duster and waved it like a magic wand. My desk then had the unmitigated gall to rise into the air and up to the ceiling. Now, some might have been just slightly taken aback by this, but I pride myself in being a master of lucid dreaming, and my lucid radar was definitely indicating this was a dream. I mean, it had to be. That being the case, I decided it was prudent to just go with the flow. No sense in needlessly provoking the imaginary wrath of any imaginary citizens of the imaginary land of Oz. So what can I do for you, Jellia?" "My friend Dorothy has been exiled to this universe from Oz." "From Oz?" I was puzzled at first, but then jogging my memories of reading the Oz books as a kid, I recalled that, although Dorothy was born and raised in Kansas, after several visits to Oz, she decided to move there permanently with her aunt and uncle. And Toto, too. "Yes, she's one of Oz's most beloved citizens," Jelly continued, "and the closest friend of our permanent sovereign, Queen Ozma." "Well, I say friend, but actually, they're engaged to be married." "Wait, Dorothy is going to marry Oz's queen?" "Oh, yes. At least that's the hope. But a dark force has cast its shadow on their dreams of marital bliss." "Ah, I see. So Oz has its share of homophobia too, then, eh?" I said, thinking of Rhea and Leda. "Not just that, heterophobia as well. Oz has become plagued by a legion of decency that asserts Oz should remain forever unchanging, meaning no romantic entanglements of any sort." "But surely a loving relationship like that is change for the better." "The Legion of Decency has no concept of change for the better, as they believe that everything is already for the best in this best of all possible Ozes. So they are demanding that Oz be purged of all romantic love, as it represents to them a direct attack on the beloved status quo. And they are especially vehement when it comes to Ozma, who, as a fairy princess, they insist must remain a chaste and pure little girl forever." "Huh, some little girl," I said, remembering the many pictures of Ozma in the original books. "Oh, sure, Ozma's a little girl, if your idea of a little girl has all the vibes of Jessica Rabbit." "Who is this Legion of Decency?" I asked. "Well, no one knows for sure. Ozma has been getting these threatening letters, supposedly from the Supreme Fairy Council of the Forest of Burzee, except there is no Supreme Fairy Council." "Ah, I see," I said. "So it could just as easily be computer hackers who have grown bored with pretending to be Nigerian princes." "Well, maybe," said Jellia, "but I'm inclined to suspect it's some wicked fairy or other spirit who's behind all this. Whoever they are, they were so enraged that Ozma and Dorothy matured themselves so they could get married that the Legion banished them both." "Oh, so you think Ozma and Dorothy both got banished?" "That's what the magic picture shows." "Ah, yes, I remember from the books about the magic picture that lets you see where anyone is at any given moment, even if they're in another dimension. I was about to point out that surely banishing the Queen of Oz came under the heading of an attack on the beloved status quo, but what did I expect from evil fairies? Logic? So I merely asked Jellia where the picture said they were. Well, it showed Dorothy back on the farm in Kansas where she came from, and Ozma working as a dancer. A dancer? Well, she must have had to get a job, Jellia said, since I gather your country has money and other atrocities. Ugh. But it makes sense she became a dancer. Fairies are great dancers, you know. I myself learned to dance from Polychrome, the Rainbow's daughter. I see. So who do you want to rescue first? I said. I'd say Dorothy's more urgent, Jellia replied. I think I'm going to need all of your deductive argumentation skills to convince her that Oz is real. You see, she's being gaslit to believe that she just dreamed Oz and never left Kansas at all. Or at least that's what the magic picture seemed to indicate. I agreed to do what I could, and with a wave of her feather duster wand, Jellia opened a door-sized portal, and we went through, and then found ourselves near a rickety old farmhouse in the midst of the great Kansas prairies. Following the voices coming from the farmhouse, we walked up the driveway. By road, I checked the time on my beloved vintage pocket watch, which has hands and goes tick-tock and everything. As we walked, I could feel my skin crawling ominously. There was distinctly something off about this place. Call it a detective's hunch, but I was 99% certain that we were not in Kansas. We came to the open window of the farmhouse, inside which we saw an older man and woman at the bedside of a young girl. She was lying supine and muttering in her sleep. "Dorothy!" Jellia cried. "It's me, Jellia!" "Oh, what? Who said that?" Dorothy groaned as she tossed and turned. "Dorothy, it is just your aunt and uncle, darling," the older woman said. Dorothy opened her eyes. "Oh, Annie M., what happened? Where am I?" "In your own little bed, dear." It was a kind of insincere, AI-sounding voice that convinced me more than ever that this was not Kansas, but just some magically synthesized fabrication. Dorothy sat up in alarm. "What's going on? What happened? This isn't my bed. Where am I? Why am I not in the Emerald City? And why is everything in sepia tone? Ah, I knew there was something suspicious looking about this place." On hearing me speak these words, Dorothy turned and noticed us for the first time. "Jellia!" she cried on seeing her friend from Oz. "Thank goodness you're here!" Then a very strange thing happened. Everything seemed to rapidly reverse itself like a rewinding video, and a second later, Jellia and I were back at the end of the drive where we first materialized. Instinctively, I glanced at my pocket watch again. It was suddenly 5 minutes earlier than when I looked at it last. Now, after a few iterations of this, I was forced to conclude that not only was this not Kansas, and in fact some just magically induced simulation, but it appeared to be a simulation governed by a time loop. Maybe I've seen too much of the movie Groundhog Day, but that's what it seemed like was happening. Very clever of these villains to instill a time loop to ensure Dorothy could never be rescued. Didn't count on dealing with Victor Cupid, though, did they? For you see, I had a plan. Since I was certain that the time loop was triggered every time Dorothy saw a fellow Ozian, namely Jellia, I explained to her that she was going to have to stay out of sight while I talked to Dorothy alone, but I asked Jellia to use her newly found magical abilities to have one of her magical portals ready to get us out of there when the time came. So I approached the farmhouse again, alone this time, and once more I saw Dorothy lying in bed with her aunt and uncle at her bedside, although I was certain that they were simulations too. I was even more certain of it as soon as I heard Auntie M speak. "What do you mean I've been in a simulation?" Dorothy was saying. There, lie quietly, Dorothy. You just had a bad dream." See what I mean? No, she's just disoriented, Em, Uncle Henry said. "It was that computer game called The Wizard of Oz. Don't you remember, Dorothy? We gave you the day off so that you could play test it at Virtual Reality Emporium. It's apparently one of these newfangled total immersion video games. The electrodes they attach to your head, Dorothy, tapped into your neural synapse thingies, and made you forget that it was just a simulation and make you believe that Oz was real." "But it wasn't," said Auntie M. "Surely you must see, Dorothy, that a place like Oz, with talking animals and dancing scarecrows and fairy princesses and universal single-payer health care could never possibly be real." Dorothy lay back and started to cry. Oh, the cruel irony. Here she was, caught in a simulation where they were gaslighting her that reality was the simulation. Now, to be clear, my common sense was constantly reminding me that this was surely just some bizarre dream I was having and that I would soon wake up from. But sometimes empathy has to override common sense. And Dorothy's bitter tears were breaking this crusty old detective's heart. Dream or no dream, I knew I had to rally her to get out of this place as soon as possible. And I quickly decided that a little reverse psychology was in order. "Excuse me, folks, is this the residence of one Dorothy Gale? I sincerely hope my girlfriend Sina will forgive me for my travesty against her beautiful Slavic accent." "Who wants to know?" said Uncle Henry. I am Sergei Abruzzi of Virtual Reality Emporium, and I just dropped by to ask Miss Dorothy how she liked our Oz game." "Oz really was just a simulated game," Dorothy moaned. "Yeah, and so sorry you only scored 4 points out of 20,000. Better luck next time, yeah." "What do you mean I scored only 4 out of 20,000 points?" Dorothy's despair now erupted into the righteous indignation I was hoping for. "Oh yeah, it says here in game blog that you lost when you made fatal mistake by proposing marriage to Ozma, who then punished you for presuming to direct romantic advances on a chaste and pure fairy princess. No. By exploding you into charred clods of earth." "That's insane," Dorothy cried. "Ozma would never treat me that way. We love each other. We want to get married." There, Dorothy. Everything will be all right," said Auntie M, sounding more sinister than ever. "The nice men from the institution are on their way. Here they are now." I looked around sharply. There in the driveway, I saw a sinister white vehicle, from which were emerging sinister men in white, carrying what were unmistakably straitjackets. "Auntie M, what are you doing?" Dorothy cried. "I'm sorry, Dorothy, but it's for the best." "Like hell it is," I cried. "Come on, Dorothy, I know you're not mad. I'll get you back to Oz." She needed no further persuading. She jumped out of bed, leaped through the window, and both of us raced off with chariots of fire-like swiftness, those nice men in white in full pursuit. Ahead, we saw the swirling vortex that was Jellia's portal, and we leaped in. A second later, Dorothy, Jellia, and I found ourselves on a street at night in an unfamiliar town, but at least back in my real universe. We were outside a building with a sign reading, "The Hot Tails Gentlemen's Club." This is where the magic picture indicated Ozma was dancing," I said, blushing slightly. "Is there a problem with that?" Jellia said with wide-eyed innocence. "Oh, no," I said, but I added to myself, well, hopefully she's going for a classy Ecdysiast angle, like Gypsy Rose Lee, or like how Ray and Leda did in their youthful cabaret days. For the uninitiated, an Ecdysiast is a stripper with a performing arts degree. "But where's my aunt and uncle?" said Dorothy anxiously. "Probably safe in Oz," I said. "Those people we saw back there were not your aunt and uncle. They would never have you institutionalized, I'm sure of it. It was all just part of the elaborate simulated universe set up by whatever evil creature banished you there." We hurried inside. This was not the kind of highbrow cabaret theater where Ray and Leda used to take it off with style. This was just another sleazy joint for the lowest common denominator in male hormones. So, determined to get in and out of there as soon as possible, we quickly found the manager and asked him about Ozma. "Ah, yeah, like I'd ever forget her audition," he told us. "How so?" "So she comes out, poshly dressed like some damn Disney princess, and I says to her, 'Look, sweetie pie, this ain't no Moulin Rouge. This is the short attention span leagues. The clients expect you to come on stage already showing skin.' Then she says she ain't got no intention of showing any skin at all. So I says, 'You gotta show everything, baby, or you can't work here.' So she stalks off in disgust, and that's the last I saw of her. Quite a bummer. She was one hot babe." So you don't know where she went?" I said hastily, before Dorothy could belt him one. "Nah, probably just took off to save face," the manager said. "Though weirdly enough, same day all this went down, someone put that on display." He pointed to a potted plant at the other end of the room. We took leave of the manager and walked over to examine it. It was undoubtedly the weirdest plant I'd ever seen. It looked like it came from outer space. Yet two of its bizarre, curving stalks ended in familiar-looking blossoms. "Poppies," Dorothy said. "Ozma loves poppies." My strange dreams, dreamlike logic, seemed inescapable. "Dorothy? Jellia? This hideous plant is your gentle fairy Queen Ozma." They were, of course, euphoric, but less shocked than I had expected, or hoped. As the manager still had a suspicious eye on us, I stood watch while Jellia whipped out her feather duster wand and muttered a reversal spell. In an instant, the alien-looking eyesore vanished, and in its place stood a beautiful young woman with long black hair, royal gown, and on her head 2 big red poppies matching the ones on the plant, and an emerald-studded circlet with the letters OZ inscribed upon it. "Ozma! Dorothy! Jellia!" The 3 friends hugged. This happy reunion was totally unrelated to the hard thud that at that moment echoed through the room. "What was that?" Queen Ozma said in distress. "Oh, it's okay," I assured her. "It's only the manager just fainted. Not every day a weird plant turns into a fairy queen. I'm sure he'll be okay after a couple of stiff drinks." "Well, thank you so much," Ozma said as we happily exited the club. "When I found out they actually wanted me to take off my clothes, nudity totally unbecoming for a fairy queen, I guess." "Oh no, I got no problem with the nudity part," the fairy queen said with a twinkle in her lovely eyes. "But not in front of people whose character I haven't even had a chance to size up over a cup of tea. So I simply turned myself into a plant until Jellia could come and rescue me, as I knew she would." A couple minutes later, Jellia opened up a mega trans-universe portal to get us back to Oz. And once again I had the jolting sensation that felt like being sucked through a vacuum cleaner. A universe-sized one this time. We were, it would appear, on our way over the rainbow. A second later, we found ourselves in this grand emerald-studded hall. Unbelievable as it seemed, we were now in the Emerald City Palace in the marvelous land of Oz. Wasting no time, we raced off to confront these dark forces that had been causing all this mischief. We came into the royal throne room, where we were greeted by a gallery of Oz celebrities, the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and many others. And there on the dais, sitting on the throne, was another Ozma. Now, of course, the good people of Oz were very confused to suddenly see two Ozmas in the room. However, the real Ozma sitting next to me obviously knew an imposter when she saw one. She whipped out her fairy wand and cast a spell, and immediately her double became hairy and hunched and turned into a grotesque half-man, half-bear type of creature. The other Ozites gasped in horror.
"Well, you found me out,"
the creature said menacingly.
"For those of you who don't know me, I am Ecdysiast, fairy historian."
"Former fairy historian, you mean," Ozma said angrily. She then went on to explain that when her mother, the great fairy queen Lurline, who many years ago first enchanted Oz to make it a full-fledged fairyland, had appointed Ecdysiast to be its historian. But over the years, its account of Ozian history just became more and more inaccurate and self-contradicting, so eventually he had to be replaced by other, more accurate historians.
"Which he had no right to do,"
Ecdysiast bellowed. "I am an Oz scholar and charter member of the International Wizard of Oz Club, so I am never mistaken. And I shall exact my revenge by purging Oz of romantic love and restoring the beloved status quo of its golden age." "Has it ever occurred to you," I said, "that maybe that status quo isn't so beloved? Maybe the good people of Oz and elsewhere want to move forward into the future, not backward to some nostalgic era that never existed anyway, except in cheesy 1950s sitcoms. What say you all? Should Ozma and Dorothy be allowed to love each other? Should romantic love and, dare I say it, sex be allowed to exist in Oz, even for immortal fairies?" The people in Oz all cheered and applauded, and in gratitude and perhaps a bit of relief, Ozma and Dorothy passionately kissed. And Ecdysiast, with a final bellow of puritanical rage, spontaneously combusted, leaving only a pile of charred cinders. With the crisis over, the Ozian Legion of Decency dissolved, and now everyone in Oz free to love who they want, Ozma and Dorothy announced that they were to be married. In gratitude for my assistance to them, they asked me to officiate the ceremony. And before I knew it, I was standing there at the altar, waiting for the ceremony to begin. Jellia Jam, who was maid of honor, approached me and handed me a strange object like a very small pen. "It's a bubble blower," she explained. "It's a tradition at Ozian weddings. Instead of throwing rice, everyone blows bubbles." A few minutes later, Dorothy came down the aisle in a beautiful white gown, accompanied by her aunt and uncle, the real ones, who were giving her away. And there, as the happy couple stood glowing before me, I performed the ceremony. "Do you, Dorothy Gale, take this fairy queen to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "And do you, Queen Ozma Tipitarius, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "By the authority vested in me as a damn good detective, I now pronounce you bonded for eternity. You may kiss each other." I admit I was much touched by the whole ceremony, and as I joined in with the festive bubble blowing, I thought of my own clients back home in my world. I realized that this dream I was having was not just some random dream. It was solidifying my resolve to help my own clients too. Because if Ozma and Dorothy could overcome the Legion of Decency that they were in their world, then surely presidential candidate Rhea Saganson and her lady love, Leda, could overcome the pathetic homophobic slurs against their relationship by a few pathetic, opportunistic politicians. And by that, they can surely win the election and carry the nation to a brighter future. Darling, Victor, darling, wake up! I sat up in bed with a start. I was back home with my girlfriend, Sina, in bed on a bright, sunny morning. I wanted to let you sleep, sweetheart, but Rhea and Leda called. They need your help soon as possible. Now, just as a little bit of a teaser here, I will just say that the extraordinary case that Rhea and Leda later that day laid out for me, involving an extraordinary precious gem called the Dragon's Gastrolith, will become the basis of my next story. However, I do have one quick postscript for this story. Sina, seeing what was no doubt a rather disoriented look on my face, asked me if I was okay. "Oh, yes, I'm fine," I said. I just had a very strange dream about the land of Oz, of all things." Well, of course it was a dream. It had to be. So it did not help my faith in the universe and how it works when, as I crawled out of bed, I noticed something sparkling and shimmering, half hidden under my pillow. I picked it up and regarded it with stunned silence. It was an emerald-studded bubble blower. But hey, I could have picked up a goofy toy like this anywhere and, just forgotten about it. Right? Madam Toastmaster.